So welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have folks here with us today for the very first of our Venn 10 webinars. This one about the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're going to learn today about why folks feel that diversity, equity, and inclusion are likely to influence community and economic development during the coming year. We have a couple great guests that you'll learn about in a couple of minutes to have that conversation with us. Just by way of orienting everybody to how this is going to go, you are not able to turn on your camera or microphone right now. And that's just because we want to keep the conversation focused on our guests for the beginning part of our webinar. But when we get to the point where we're going to ask folks to participate in the conversation with us, we'll give you the opportunity to turn your camera and microphone on if you wish. You're also more than welcome to stay off camera. That's totally fine. And you can ask your questions via the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat as well, so you don't have to chime in to ask your question. We're going to give you the ability to turn your camera on or your microphone on if you want to ask a question. And the way we're going to know you want to ask a question is you're going to raise your hand. And so hopefully you know how to access the raise your hand option. It's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on reactions, there is a button there that says raise hand. So if you raise your hand when we get to that point to ask a question, then we'll know that that you want to chime in. And we'll give you the opportunity to turn on your camera and your microphone. And like I said, feel free to use the chat as well to ask your questions, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll bring those questions into the conversation. I'm going to, as you'll see here, I'm going to switch to a different screen here, and I'm going to be, as we go through today, there'll be some things popping up over my shoulder over here that, are things that we're talking about. The links that I'm going to on screen here, we're also going to share those in the chat as we go along. So you're going to see a bunch of links popping into the chat as we proceed throughout the webinar today. If you want to get at those links right now, you can go to the first link we're going to put in the chat is my link tree, and that's linktr.ee/Jim Woodell. And we put that in the chat for you. If you go to my link tree, the very first button there says Venn 10 webinar on diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you click on that first button on my link tree, you're going to go to this post at Venn Community. And if you scroll down, you'll see that the first comment on this post is actually all of the links that we're going to be sharing with you today. So you have access to those right away if you want them, and you have access the same way to those links even after we're done today. So for those of you who don't know what the heck this Venn 10 is that we're talking about, let me give you a little bit of context. Venn 10 is an initiative of something we call the Venn Community. Venn Community is an online community that we've established, and where we're engaging professionals in economic development, community development, and higher education, folks who are working at, as we say, the intersections of talent, innovation, and place. And that community is a place that's open and accessible to anybody who's interested in those topics. And, it's a place where you can share ideas and resources, engage with your peers, and get new ideas essentially for increasing the economic and community impact that you and your organization are seeking to have. So that's Venn Community. You should have gotten a link to Venn Community. You can go there and check out some of what we've been posting there. To learn more specifically about the Venn 10, actually, before I get to that, let me just quickly mention, in addition to Venn Community, we have something called Venn University. And again, you're going to get a link to that. And it's on the list of links. Venn University is an online professional development resource for that same group of people. So all of the folks that we're inviting to participate with us in Venn Community, we're also inviting to join us at Venn University to participate in professional development opportunities around talent, innovation, and place. So the last thing I want to talk to you about by way of context is the Venn 10. So I mentioned that this is an effort of Venn Community. What we decided we would do, we have this faculty for our Venn University, and I'll talk a little bit about those folks in just a minute, And our faculty had a conversation late last year about, gee, what are all of the things? We were talking about what should we be talking about in Venn community. We said, well, what are all the things that are going to affect economic and community development next year? So we said, well, why don't we ask people? So we put up a survey and we listed 65 different ideas, strategies, policies, and practices that might influence economic and community development in 2022. And we had people vote on them. And so what we did was last month in January, we announced the Venn 10, the top 10 of those 65 ideas, the ones that were most likely to influence economic and community development in 2022. And so the webinar is available at, I think you must have gotten a link to this by now. This is the post that we have on Venn Community. And we not only have the replay of the webinar, we also have the list of all 10 of the issues that we are going to be focusing on for the rest of the year in subsequent webinars. So that's the Venn 10, and we hope that if you don't already know about the Venn 10, you take some time to go check out the announcement webinar and learn more about what some of the upcoming topics are going to be. With all of that said, what I'd like to do is introduce one of our Venn University faculty who's here with us today to lead the conversation with our special guests. So I mentioned that Venn University has all of these really smart folks working together to develop professional development for folks in economic and community development. And I think you may have gotten a link in the chat again. This is to a post where we talk about all of those great faculty. The post has lots of information about each and every one of them. But the one I'd like to talk to you about right now is Julia Potter, and you'll have a link to her bio as well. Julia Potter is a good friend and colleague of mine. I've been working with her for a few years now, and I'm so glad that she's joined us as part of the faculty of Venn University. She and I are developing a course together called Decoding Ecosystems, where we're looking at how can different kinds of organizations in economic and community development ecosystems better understand each other. So higher ed institutions, local government, nonprofits, the private sector, how do they all find ways to work together, span boundaries, and create impact in their communities and regions? So Julia can tell you more about herself. You can also check out her bio on the website. But I just want to say, Julia, thank you so much for being here today and for leading the conversation for us.
Jim, thank you so much. And what an honor to be here with you and our guests and those of you who are joining today's conversation. I am indeed Julia Potter, and I am honored to be a faculty member working with Jim on the Venn University project. My background comes from California State University, Northridge, which is a very large public institution located in the city of Los Angeles. I had a 15-year career there, largely anchored around external relations, partnership development. That's really where Jim and I first met in working on the Innovation and Economic Prosperities University program. I have retired from Cal State Northridge, but I have come back to work with them on a social justice project. I also am past president of UEDA, the University Economic Development Association, again, another connection with Jim. So the ability to be with you today, particularly around the Venn 10 outcomes, and this topic around diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that is exceptionally important to all of us, not just to me. We all have impact because of really considering and embracing the conversation around DEI. Cal State Northridge is one of the most diverse universities in the country. So my work here at this university always had that as an underpinning of what we were talking about when we talked about student success and connection with the community. So, so with that, I really want to pivot and get started with Faye and Paul. Again, I'm so honored that you have joined us today. Your work is it's just exemplary and inspiring in every way. So if I may, Jim, can we just get to it?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. So I'm going to start with Faye Horwitt is President and CEO of Forward Cities. I know Jennifer will give you a link to their website. You can learn more about their unbelievable work. And then Paul Wilson Jr. is with the Russell Innovation Innovation Center in Atlanta, really doing remarkable work around, I would call it the equity and the inclusion part of the conversation beyond just diversity. Paul, it is the largest Black incubator in the country, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. So, Faye, I'm going to throw it to you. And please, if you would just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work. But again, I do want to direct everybody to the chat. You can go to their websites and do a more deep dive into Faye's work.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks so much for having us, Forward Cities, and myself. Jim, thank you for the invitation. Consider you all to be fantastic partners as we're currently working together, and look forward to further collaboration. Thankful for the opportunity to connect. I'm the president and CEO of Forward Cities. We're a national nonprofit we're headquartered in Durham. And our mission is to help communities and leaders to grow more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems, both grow and sustain. And we have been around since 2014 in some form or another, gone through a few iterations since then, but now we serve on a national level. And we've worked in over 38 communities over the past 4 or 5 years, and just been a phenomenal experience in being able to, and for us, it's real-time walk alongside communities and leaders to understand and assess their local ecosystems from an equity lens, to collaborate together, to sense make around the data that's emerging, that we help them emerge, and to take that data and that sense making and push it into something actionable. We are not about writing strategic plans that sit on the shelf, but really about making sure we're building the capacity of communities to be able to take an equity lens to their entrepreneurial ecosystem development, and do it in a collaborative way. Which often doesn't happen. Obviously, we know about silos, and that is a lot of what we're attempting to sort of work people through to get on the other side of. And we do that through coming into communities. We typically will engage or contract or hire someone local in the community that already has trust with entrepreneurs and service providers in that region or area. We work with them to then guide and develop typically a group or a council of folks to dive into this work together. And then we tend to help them develop pilot projects to sort of test some things, get their hands into the dirt and play around and create some things together that we can then evaluate and then be able to share back with them recommendations for what they might do together going forward. So we're excited to be here. A couple of our other collaborations include the Kauffman Foundation. We run their eShip Communities program. We recently just received the SBA grant to be one of the 51 organizations across the country, the only one in North Carolina to run their Community Navigator pilot program. And we're excited also to be kicking off this year a Black Wall Street Forward engagement in North Carolina and some other states, hopefully as we go through the year. So fantastic to be here.
Congratulations on all of that, Faye. Thank you so much. So Paul is the Vice President of Innovation and Entrepreneurism at the Russell Center, and you have a long history of impactful work as well. So Paul? Oh, Paul's on mute.
All right, there we go. All right, thank you. Faye, that's a tough act to follow. I'm going to say that. So, no, it's exciting definitely to hear what you all are doing. And since you're our neighbors up in North Carolina, I'm sure we need to have a few conversations offline. But definitely, I thank you all for having me here. I'm excited to be here. Those who don't know who the Russell Center is, the full name of the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs. We are we use the term business generator serving Metro Atlanta, particularly created for supporting Black entrepreneurs and overcoming the unique barriers that they face in building thriving businesses. As you mentioned earlier, we are 54,000 square feet, which is the largest center of its kind in the United States. We own the building outright. So that's one incredible strategic advantage that we have from that standpoint. And our big ideas model, which serves businesses from pre-startup and just the concept stage, all the way to some businesses that are global, even, and everything in between. Our goal is to meet the business owners really at every step along that journey, and being able to customize our resources and our services and our education for them at every one of those steps. And in that process, not just about education, it is about building a community of support within that network of businesses, as well as increasing access externally. Definitely, as Faye was speaking about local resources, we don't want to be insular either, and our model is not, where we have several resource partners from different lenders, from corporations, from other nonprofits, even government agencies that are plugged into what we're doing. Because our goal is, how do we create an easy access bridge for those who are part of the Russell Center to get to these resources? Sometimes it's hard to get access to those resources, or hard to meet somebody, or I may see the website, but how do I meet somebody I can really actually talk to, have a conversation about my business, to get some practical and legitimate resources, right, to help me to move forward? We get to play the role of that really intermediary. A lot of our partners actually are physically in the building, where they actually lease space from us. So we really, create that opportunity, again, to build those connections, build those relationships, bring the resources to those businesses from that standpoint. And of course, what we're doing here really builds on the legacy of Mr. Herman J. Russell, a company that is still in existence over 70 years later, one of the most successful Black entrepreneurs that this country has ever seen, and to have the opportunity to really build on his legacy of creating more Herman Russells, but also more other individuals, right, that can impact their communities through the growth and development of their businesses. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to do that. And in terms of the SBA program, we are actually, one of our partners was awarded the Hub contract for Georgia G-Men, and we're actually a spoke for them. And they're also in our building. And so just to be able, right, to leverage those federal resources, local resources, resources from our partners, and then partner with other organizations who are also doing great work. Again, it does require ecosystem. And I've been saying, we used to say, it takes a village to raise a child. Now I say it takes a village to raise a business, right? And it is that ecosystem where a lot of different types of resources can come together and collaborate to create that supportive network.
Congratulations to you too, Paul. Just amazing transformative work taking place at the Russell Center. And I'm just so glad you and Faye now have met, and
yes.
Let the work begin. It's
absolutely
exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So with that, Jim, I actually just wanted to follow up on really the question of the Venn TAM outcome. Why do you think that our community identified DEI as a top influencer in economic and community development in 2022? Just what are your thoughts about what that tells us? Faye, I'll start with you.
Yes, thank you, Julia. This is something that I've thought quite a bit about over the past 3 years, and it's been a fascinating trajectory to watch. We obviously have summer of unrest a few years back and for race in America. And obviously this is not new in our country. This is like systemic. This has been happening for forever, right? I think that there is when things happen that are visceral, and typically is some sort of violent episode, what it does is that it sort of it shakes us, and it makes us sort of shakes us to reality almost. There are people every day, people of color live this experience every day. We have these conversations with each other all the time. it never stopped, right? And so, but if this is not your lived experience, it's not an everyday thing for you. And so what happens is people sort of fall asleep and don't think about these things. I liken it to the idea of being left or right-handed. And you go through life, you're just doing your thing, you're right-handed, you don't think about it because everybody's right-handed, right? Or most people are right-handed. And so you don't think about it. But when you were a kid, you ever remember picking up those left-handed scissors?
Right.
And they had a box and you're just like, oh my God, like what in the world? This doesn't function. I can't do the thing that I know how to do because I'm not equipped. It's foreign, right? And I think that when we have these sort of visceral, violent episodes, related to race in our country, that's what happens. The same thing happens related to gun violence. We go to sleep and we're like, whatever. And then, it's not important for us to address or deal with until a room full of, kids gets killed with an assault rifle. And then suddenly everybody's awake and talking about gun control. This is the same thing. And so this has been the pattern of history. This is the first time, however, at least in my adult life, what I've seen happen is that the conversation moved beyond police and physical violence to economics. And I think I would like to actually credit, and I know there's good and bads to this, but I would like to credit the corporate community to sort of realizing the tide. And immediately a lot of companies started talking about what they were going to do related to racial equity. And once you have corporations and money drive power in this country, right? So once you have corporations stepping up to say, in words at least, they're going to do a thing, right? That's when everybody else is like, oh, whoa, okay, money is moving in that direction. That means that we better pay attention. And so what I see happening is a lot of entities and organizations that never paid attention to this before, never cared about it before. You had to beg and plead with them to actually hear you related to these issues, are suddenly leaning in because there's money at the table. And they see where this money is headed and the direction it's going. Whether or not these corporations sort of lean in and follow through on what they're saying doesn't matter. What they've done is they've lit a match now for everybody else. And now government is following suit, and it's not going to last. I will tell you, it's not going to last a long time. But I think that everybody is now waking up and realizing we have a short window of time if we do this work. Those of us that do this work on a regular basis to take advantage of the fact that there is money and power right now, because that window will close. And so if we can do some things right now to build in new infrastructure for these things and put in place things that are not short-term, band-aids, but long-term narrative and culture change, then I think we have an opportunity to really make a difference.
Wow, Faye, thank you so much. Paul, your thoughts?
Sure, and I'll pick up definitely where Faye, some of her thoughts led to those visceral moments, right, in history. And oftentimes it takes something that is seen typically on a national stage, right? Emmett Till, right? That had happened to young Black boys plenty of times, right? More than it was normal, but all of a sudden it was in our living rooms. It became different. The 4 young Black girls in Birmingham, right? Bombings had happened before then, but there was something different about it coming to our living room. Rodney King, right? If we fast forward to Rodney King, police had been beating Black men for years, but now it was on live TV almost, right? And then we fast forward to George Floyd, where we literally saw a man's life taken, right, in front of our eyes, and the whole process happened. So yeah, there are these points that shock us, right? Shock us into the reality of what's already been happening. But Faye, I think you made an incredible point about the corporate dollar that then came behind the wave. Because one of the things that I noticed too about what happened after George Floyd was not just the national movement around just, let's say, protests, in particular led by Black Lives Matter, but others, but it became global, right? It wasn't just now in Minnesota. It wasn't just in the Midwest of the United States. It literally was global, right? And so to me, that helped put the pressure on corporations, because if it's just isolated, you can kind of be bothered by it and it'll go away. But also, all of a sudden, if it's now global, now you're talking about multinationals that almost have to pay attention to the threat, right, to their profitability. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of projects saw, is a threat to my profitability. And I believe absolutely there are caring people that help drive those decisions. But again, we did see corporate spending and corporate donations and corporate commitments like we have never seen before that ended up crossing so many different lines. I mean, from, of course, to just, let's say, in general, nonprofit corporations, but investments in HBCUs that we had never seen before. I mean, HBCUs, I guess years ago, we're saying that we're on their deathbed, and are they even relevant anymore? And do we even need them anymore? All of a sudden now they're getting multi-million-dollar donations from corporations that we had never seen before. Into businesses, organizations. Unfortunately, we were Rice being one of those organizations that is, it's funny, we're a nonprofit, we're still young. The majority of our dollars come from corporations, not private foundations or individual donors, which is very uncharacteristic, right, of a nonprofit organization. In fact, we get a majority of our donations from corporations. But again, so there was a shift, and I think it was, and again, oftentimes fear of pain drives us to make decisions. And in this case, I think that was a lot of what drove corporates. But I think there was some teeth behind what they committed to in terms of the direction, right, that those donations went into. And to me, I think there's an opportunity for those donations to be sustainable, right? It kind of goes back to the old adage, I can give a person to fish, or I can teach them how to fish, right? So of course, we know, and Africa is one of the greatest examples. A study years ago that said there's been $1 trillion worth of donations into Africa, right? Well, what has that $1 trillion gotten us? We know there's a lot of corruption on all sides, right? But what does that $1 trillion really produce if it wasn't teaching people how to be self-sustaining, which a lot of it wasn't. It was meeting maybe immediate needs, right, which is needed, but then what's sustainable after that? To me, when you talk about investing, definitely in the households, right, but into businesses, now we're taking it a step further to say, yes, let's address maybe an immediate need, but how do we help you create something sustainable that now you're sustaining others? Right now, you're creating jobs versus we're teaching you how to go get a job, right? We absolutely need people. Everybody can't be an entrepreneur, right? But for those who can, and for those who can build an entity, a corporation, a business that then creates jobs, right? What does that do for a community beyond, again, just meeting an immediate need? And so, but I do agree with Faye, absolutely. I think we're in a small window because people will go to sleep. And again, even I think for corporates, if they don't see a return on their investment, if you will, right, they'll get distracted and go find something else, right, to focus on next. And so I do believe we have a small window, a sense of urgency that we have to take this attention, the power, the resources that have come and do something that is impactful, that will have a long-term, right, sustainability to it, but definitely something that, again, cannot be short-lived, and we cannot take it for granted that it'll be like this even a year from now, right, even 2 years from now. But let's take what has the environment that we're in right now, and how do we leverage it as much as possible.
Oh, Paul, yeah, well said. Jim, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, just a quick thought in response to this. As you're talking, it's like, why is it going to influence economic and community development? Well, because of money, right? Like that's usually the thing that's going to influence these kinds of things. But what I'm hearing is that it's got to be more than the money, right? We've got to take advantage of the money, and we've got to take advantage of it to do things that also change minds and mindsets and cultures. That's the thing that's going to last, maybe, if we can get at least some, get some purchase there and dig in on some of the culture and mindsets kinds of issues. I think we might have some opportunity to make some of this last. I agree that there's a window, especially with the investments, but maybe we can, keep that window open a little longer if we can focus some of our attention, not just on the programs, but also on the relationships and the, changing minds piece of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, thank you, Jim. I completely concur, which really led to my next question, was really about shaping that conversation with corporations, businesses? Like, how do you specifically connect that dot with entrepreneurial activity and access to opportunity? Well, which leads in a little bit, I think, into the whole ecosystem conversation is, how do you not lose that moment to change minds and to have something that is permanent, not just in the moment? You know, Paul, to your point about, you got to find that sustainability. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, opening thoughts. Faye, I'll go to you.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that I used to see them as separate, but they're sort of coming together in my mind now as what we call narrative change, and that has to do with it's about how do you rather than trying to attack something and force a change. You help people understand and identify the environment in which, whatever it is you want to change is happening. Like, what is that landscape? Helping people understand that, and then modeling something different. And by modeling something different, we're not just telling you, hey, stop being racist.
Right.
That does not help anything, right?
Right.
It is, well, what does different look like? And modeling something different in terms of, and in this case, in terms of leadership, in terms of investment, in terms of culture, leadership, and in doing it and modeling something that can work, then what you do, and then you tell the story, right, of it working and why it's working. And that creates a new and different opportunity and culture. It is an asset-based approach. And then what people begin to do is they begin to pick up and model that activity themselves, because they see that it actually has traction and it works. And it's very different than having a conversation to try and force people to change policy or to change behavior. It is about, let's just do it differently. And for me, when we're talking about entrepreneurial ecosystems, we're looking at changing 4 key things, and that is, or shifting, right, in that narrative change. We want to shift stories. So we want to tell the stories of the success of business and investment in people of color. We want to shift culture. So we want to be able to, again, be doing things in different ways, be having conversations that we've never had before, be uplifting leaders and putting them in positions, and that leads to shifting power, right? Shifting where the power sits, and how decisions are made and by whom, and then shifting capital, which is the last piece. If that all leads to, okay, this is where the money begins to flow, right? Then once you shift that capital, that's the last piece that really triggers sustainable, to Paul's point, something that's sustainable. And for me, a lot of this begins with this who is leading. What will make this time different is who is leading and making the decisions. And if you're going to have an equity initiative, please don't have it led by, a white man. These are the kinds of things you'd think that people would understand this and know, but sometimes it doesn't. Or don't give the big DEI grant to the white-led institution because they're suddenly waking up and realizing they want to do something related to racial equity. Center leadership of color in the decisions about what's going to happen. I like to say nothing about us without us. And that is what I think is going to make a real shift and change.
Faye, powerful, yes. Paul, your thoughts, particularly with the background of Rice. This is really important conversation now to be having, isn't it?
It is, and I'll say right on target, and really I'll just kind of pick up where Faye left off. Collaboration, right, as a part of that process, and exposure. Now, actually, I'll start with exposure first, right, because it's easy to assume that, let's say whites and others make decisions that are racist. It's easy to assume that. Sometimes it's ignorance. There's a difference between ignorance and racism, right? Or lack of, and I say ignorance from lack of exposure, right? Not lack of intellect, it's lack of exposure. So if you've never been exposed to another culture, I don't care who it is, me personally, right, I'm ignorant about that culture. I may make decisions that weren't intended to hurt them, but me not being aware of that culture can hurt them, right, from that standpoint. And again, so separating, let's say, racist decisions from, I would say, ignorant decisions, to me, like, this time is that opportunity to say, well, let's have more, and I know we've tried to have a lot of conversations, but let's have more collaborative conversations. So to Faye's point, who's leading the conversation, but also where is the conversation headed? Because if the conversation is only cut a check to my organization and leave me alone, we've been doing that for years and that hasn't worked either, right? We've been doing it for years where it's been more patronizing, let's say, white-led organizations, even giving tons of money, even millions of dollars to Black organizations, but there was no dialogue, there was no understanding, there was no connection. So you're still stuck with the same issues, right? And then when the money ran out, what happens? I may go back and ask for some more, or we're still dealing with the same situations. So if there's more opportunity now, which I've seen it more over the last 2 years, where people now are having dialogue and willing to listen to say, you know what, maybe I have been wrong, or maybe I haven't been exposed. Let me come and learn, right? Let me come and learn what's happening in your community. Let me come and learn. There's a book written years ago, it's called When Helping Hurts. And the premise of that book was, we're just going to give money to the problem, and we never solved the problem. We may have actually helped perpetuate the problem because we kept coming in with emergency funds and never created sustainability. So now you also create a dependency in that community, right, for just quick fixes. So even with good intentions, without understanding, things can still go right south and not be as optimal as we would like. So I think when we talk about collaboration, so one example, like with us, I talk about all the corporate dollars. Well, with our proposals now that we write, we use a term called skilled volunteerism. So yes, we're asking for the dollars, but guess what? We're also asking for your employees. We're asking for the skills of your accountant and the lawyer and, you know, the marketing person, right? Because what's that going to do? When that person comes to help, they're getting exposed also to the Black entrepreneur. So it's not just a one-way conversation where the check is going one way and there's nothing coming back the other way. When those interactions occur, now there's understanding. It really goes both ways now, right? But also that employee is going back to that company with a whole different perspective, right, than they had about a person or a community, because now they've been exposed. They've sat down and had conversations. They've had some meals together, right? They've wrestled through problems together. So relationships are built. So now you have more understanding that's built. So now when that employee is back in that corporation making decisions, potentially about a community, they have a whole different perspective because of their exposure now versus before. Even if there was no ill intent, it could have still been hurtful, right? But now I have a responsibility now that I've been exposed, right? I have more accountability even because I've been exposed. So now if I make a decision, I can probably pass judgment if it's a negative decision, right, unintentionally. But more than likely, there's going to be more thoughtfulness, right, to those decisions when there's been more exposure. So I think the more that we can drive that, and the more that again, many white-led organizations being willing to learn versus just feeling I show up with an answer and you just take my answer because I'm bringing you the money. You just got to take it all. Again, I think that has the shift, and there has to be more dialogue in both ways. Right. And I think organizations, even let's say Black organizations, community-led organizations, also have to be willing not just to take money, but to begin to ask for more than money, right? For other things than just, you know, because again, that can also be a short-term mentality too. I just need a check to get to the next pay cycle, right? Well, we got to, I think, change some of those conversations around, you know, what goes beyond the financial aspects of what we do. And how do we, again, drive more of that dialogue and conversations? And then we do more than just meet about it, right? We create opportunities to literally work together. And until we do more of that, again, I think we'll keep going around in these other, you know, negative cycles.
Yeah. Paul, I think the insights that you and Faye have provided us are just really provocative, interesting. I mean, something that we really need to embrace. I want to just remind everybody, if you have a thought, a question that you want to throw in right now, please use the raise the hand, and you are part of this conversation because every one of us are impacted by this conversation, no matter what your professional role is or where you live or how you go about your business. This affects everybody. I do have one more question thought, and then definitely we really do want our participants, everyone, just to join this conversation. And my question to Faye and Paul is really, what is your hope for 2022 around this conversation about the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What is, like, I hate to narrow it down, but like, what is your one biggest hoped outcome in this coming year? Faye?
One, huh?
Just
Okay,
one,
we
I'm
get
sorry.
one.
But we can keep the conversation going in the community because you're right. This is a conversation that should never end, because it always is going to morph and change and have other influencers at work. So I'm sorry, Faye, just one.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it. I'll lean in here by talking about actually a book that I read that sort of changed my thinking around this in a powerful way. This gentleman by the name of Edgar Villanueva. He's written a book called Decolonizing Wealth. And he's actually he was from North Carolina, went to college here and worked in my hometown of Winston-Salem, in philanthropy. And the book's about philanthropy and philanthropy's role in colonization of America. And it shook me really to the core. As a leader of a nonprofit organization who much of our existence, and I'm excited to hear Paul say that they're on the corporate side. I look forward to having more conversations about that because we're primarily funded by national and local foundations. And the book talks about the history of philanthropy in this country, and that in many ways it began as a tax shelter. For rich families, rich white families who and like in the South, a lot of tobacco families, right? Who had slaves earlier and then had indentured, workers, and then were paying Black workers pennies on the dollar to everyone else. And that's actually how they made their fortune, right? And so you build a fortune of wealth on the backs of indigenous people from across the world, wherever you have stolen them from, or whoever's land that you took. And then what they make all this money on their backs, and then they say, oh, well, man, we got to pay taxes on all this money. What do we do? We don't want to have to pay all these taxes. And so they're like, well, we can figure out a way that we can funnel this money. We can sort of, use it to better the community of the people that we just withheld money from. And the reason why they need our help is because we withheld their money. But then we're going to ask those same people to jump through hoops to beg to get that money back through grants. And when I read it, it just like knocked me down. And so he talks about a different way of thinking about philanthropy, and he's doing this work around the country with different foundations to help them reimagine, and he calls it money as medicine. And how do they sort of step back, do things differently? Some of it involves participatory grant making, so really involving the people whose communities are most impacted and most in need, and bringing them to the table and letting them decide how the money is spent. Giving more grants for capacity building for organizations and for operational costs and things to help them actually be able to become sustainable, so they don't have to keep coming back and begging for money. And using the money to invest in having some healing conversations in communities about why this happened and how do we completely shift the paradigm. So for me, and some of those things have to do with the way our systems in America have been built. And so when we think about things like even like venture capital, it is designed to be necessarily extractive for any business. It's designed to take and to take from those who are creating value and to put it in the hands of the powerful and elite so that they can have more of what they already have. And so if we think about some of our structures, even our banking structures and the way all of this, it's not just about funneling where the money goes, it's about actually rebuilding completely new systems. So if there was anything I'd like to see change, the one thing I would like for us to rethink the traditional systems and structures that are driving our economy, and think about what ways can we actually rebuild. And I'm not talking about like fixing, I'm talking about bulldozing and creating new, right? So that, to me, that mind shift, I think, is going to be something really powerful. There are some things that have been happening for communities of color for centuries that work for us for economic development, lending circles, things that are, rather than being extractive, they are based in community, and they're based in how do we care for each other and grow together economically versus this competition of trying to extract and get as much money and make as much as you then make more than your neighbor. So anyway, that's me on my soapbox.
That was a good one, Faye. Thank you very much. Paul, your thought. What is your one hope?
Hey, I don't know if I can top that. That's pretty significant. But my one hope for this year, I said probably several, but one is that we wouldn't need another nationally viewed tragedy to see more contributions, innovation, collaboration, partnerships, $1 million contributions that come out of the places of power, right, the sources of power, that the momentum that's already been there would actually increase without having another tragedy have to drive it. And because again, we're tired of that cycle. And as one of my hip hop artists I listen to is that we need to stop hashtagging caskets. You know what I mean? And stop having a tragedy be the motivator, or that drives change or drives behavior change. But that we've already seen enough, right, of that happen. So let's build on even this last couple of years where we have seen collaboration, we have seen some change, right? We have seen investments, and let's take that and just do more of that, right? Without having, the pain of of a tragedy, some at that level have to, kind of kick us back into gear. So mine, it's short, it's simple, but I know, but again, I think the foundation at least has been started to be laid in that direction, and hopefully we can just, kind of keep building on that momentum.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. So this is the time really we want to hear from others. And I think Monique has a thought that she wants to share with the group.
Oh, we're waiting for
Monique. Thank you.
Oh, there she is. Okay, great.
There she is.
I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with internet connection.
Oh, a shared community experience. That's my one hope.
First, thank you so much. I'm a fan of so many of you on this call, and excellent work and discussion today. I have a little bit of a challenging question, and it's one that I constantly roll over in my mind, is how do we challenge the definition of what some of our cultures and communities can participate in? One of the messages that we've been sending from Kentucky is that anyone, whether from a rural area or a challenged community or even a community and technical college in some cases, can contribute to high technology research, can be the next inventor of something to change the world. A lot of times when I see work in the diversity and inclusion space, we're almost counted out in a sense before we have an opportunity to try. And so how do we make that narrative really front focus that innovation and diversity and innovation is not just about doing the right thing, it's about doing the right thing for our nation to be competitive. And in order for America to sort of corner the market on having the best ideas, we have to involve the full nation in that process. The hard thing that I've run into, especially in philanthropy, is getting them to grasp that concept of it goes beyond basics needs. It doesn't leave them behind, but it's expecting more at the same time. What are your all's thoughts on that?
You weren't kidding, Monique. You had a big question there.
You know what? Thank you for that, Monique. It's a tough nut to crack, and when I think about this, I actually think about that we're starting the conversation too late, and that has to do with our education system.
Yep.
And so I think what happens is that by the time people of color in our nation have reached adulthood, by the time they're 18, they have essentially been indoctrinated to think that their opportunity lies only in one path, and that is to get a job, to work for someone else, to make money, so that they can make money. And this is across our entire education system, and not just people of color, but we tend to, particularly if we don't have the same generational wealth and generational history of entrepreneurship, if we're not getting it at home, then school is the one place, if we're talking about public education, that I believe is missing the mark on preparing people both for innovative workforce and for entrepreneurship that grows out of that innovation. And when I look at the curriculum, I still have no idea why kids take the classes that they take. Why? We're the only country in the nation, I think, that has the kind of curriculum that we have. The majority of the things that we are forcing kids to take, they will never use in their lifetime. But we're not teaching them entrepreneurial mindset. We are not teaching them innovation and collaboration skills. We are focusing on, teaching to the test to sort of check off the box to get to the next grade, but we're not preparing kids. So by the time I'm a Black kid who is like 18, they don't understand that they can be more than consumers of products. And so I think that's where the shift has to come, because we've got to see that there's other opportunities earlier on in the lives of Black and Indigenous youth in our country. By the time they're at adulthood, their only choice is, I got to go get the easiest job I can get and make money, and they never get out of that cycle.
All this is certainly in your wheelhouse too, isn't it? In your work.
It is. And I was actually going to start at the education component too, and take it in a very similar direction, even in terms of how we teach what intelligence is, right? There's a book out called The 8 Intelligences, right? Where typically we rank the intelligences based kind of like, if you are intelligent enough to get to college, right? We believe you have the best chance to make it in life. Everybody else is secondary. Right. And so, and even if you think college versus technical school, there's already this dilemma right there in the mind that we already see this automatically. Right. No matter how smart the person is, if they went to college versus technical school, they're already ranked right within our society. So even how we teach, how we educate, how we train, right, for our kids, youth, young adults to maximize what they've been given is typically be limited to a box. That if you're in this good box, you're going to be really well off. If you're in everything else, well, good luck with that, right? And so I think, we even have to shift. So one example I can give where a corporation has said, you know what, let's kind of shift how we think about that too. So Jamie Dimon, CEO of Chase Bank, was here just last week. And one of the initiatives that they have is they have eliminated the college degree component from like 60,000 jobs. Within JP Morgan Chase, where you're no longer required to have a college degree to get a certain group of jobs. That's huge, right? And now the focus is on certification. So if you can get a certain type of certification in 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, right, designed for a specific task, a specific skill set, to a specific job, that's much more relevant than having to wait a whole semester, a whole 2 years to get a degree that people then disrespect anyway. Right. So, so even the shift in what we celebrate, what we value, how we teach, how we train, and then how we reward that at the end of the process is major, right, too, in this, from that standpoint, even from an entrepreneurial standpoint, where we may even, categorize who we think are going to be the best entrepreneurs, right? The most creative people, right? Or the most whatever. And that's even wrong in that, too, I think, and even how we, encourage people, right, to be entrepreneurs and be how to engage, the marketplace and leverage their skills and their talents. So yeah, so a lot of it absolutely starts on the educational side. But even like, again, I think Chase is a good example that, can we shift even how we value adults and their life experience, their educational experiences that can be very diverse, and how do we take the gifts that they have and that are just having them in a different box, and leverage that, you know what I mean, from that standpoint.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what? An hour clearly is not enough. It's not enough. But at least we had an opportunity to come together today and just start. And I cannot thank you enough, Faye and Paul, for your wisdom, your expertise, your lived experience, your imagination, and your hopes that you shared with us. Jim, we just have to keep going, and everybody will keep going. I'm going to, Jim, I'm going to ask you to just sort of close us out.
All right, great. Yeah, and let me just add my thanks, Faye and Paul, and to you too, Julie, for being such a great facilitator of our conversation. I do want to quickly talk about another topic. I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. When we did the Venn 10, we realized that we were sort of capturing some ideas in time about what people thought would be the big influences this year, but we didn't know what was going to come up. And so what we're going to try to do on each of these webinars is talk a little bit about a topic that might be influencing economic and community development in the coming year that we couldn't have known about when we did the Venn 10 voting. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about, the one thing that I want to talk about today in that vein is the war in Ukraine. It's happening half a world away, but it is obviously having reverberations across the globe, not just in terms of political foreign policy and political issues, but also on our economy and the very real ways in which that's happening. My feeling is that the way that the war in Ukraine is mostly affecting us is reminding us about VUCA, V-U-C-A. If you don't know VUCA, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which is essentially what describes the world we live in today. And to me, the biggest thing that the war in Ukraine is doing is reminding us once again, as if we haven't had enough of these reminders in the last couple of years, that we think we know what we need to do next in economic and community development, but everything is volatile. I tried to find an economist who would come and talk to us today about what the effect of the war in Ukraine. Couldn't get somebody, but I did talk to a couple of folks, and I also found this article, which we're giving you the link to from UCLA Anderson School. And they talk a little bit about what the effects might be. What they talk about are, defense spending will be up. And so that means if you live in a community where defense spending affects the economy, then that's going to have an effect on your local economic development. The interaction between the war and the uncertainties created by COVID are going to create all kinds of complications, least of which, of course, is not that higher inflation is likely here to stay for at least the better part of this year. And they also say that all of this is largely because of oil supply issues. And that affects everything. The price of oil essentially affects everything. When I talked to an economist friend of mine, she said, places that grow wheat and that produce oil, they're going to do well. So they have some opportunities in economic development this year. But places that produce auto and airplane parts, for example, especially those that are normally exported to Russia, might be affected negatively and might have a more difficult time with economic development. From the community development perspective, my economist friend also mentioned that cities with neighborhoods where there's a density of Russian folks, there's going to be some challenges there, right? Because we know how people can be, and it's not always when in times of war, we don't necessarily show our better sides. And so there might be some community development issues that come up in those areas. We'd love to know about how the war or any of these influences, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, not being least of them, are affecting these things in your community. So as we close out, we'd like to encourage you to join our community at Venn community. We're going to share a link with you, and all you have to do is go to our community. I'm going to log out here for a second so I can show you. When you go to our community page, you're going to see this button, Join Now. And all you have to do is click on that button and you can get involved in this conversation. We can keep this conversation going together. We have a post about today's webinar. And if you want to continue to ask any questions or share your thoughts, all you have to do is go to that post and go to the bottom. And when you're logged in, you'll be able to hit reply here and share your thoughts on that. We're also sharing with you a link to a post about this idea of global disruption, the war in Ukraine, and what kinds of local effects it might have. So we encourage you to visit that post as well in our community and share your perspectives on how that particular topic is affecting economic and community development in your community. We definitely want you all, we're so glad that you joined us for this conversation. We'd love to have you engaged in the conversation in our community. So please join us that way. And then finally, before you go, I would just encourage you, and we're going to share one more link with you, to visit this page where we are listing all of the Venn 10 webinars that are coming up. We've got Strategic Doing coming up in next month as one of the ideas or practices, in this case, affecting economic and community development this year. We're looking forward to sharing with you ideas about that particular methodology that many communities are using. And then in May, we're going to talk about reskilling and upskilling in workforce development and talent development. We've got then an agenda for the rest of the year. We'll be posting the rest of the year's webinars here soon. And please keep coming back to this page and register for the upcoming webinars again. Or when you get a chance to register for those additional webinars. Again, we're just so glad that you could join us today. Thank you very much. Again, Faye, Paul, Julia, it was a fantastic conversation. The replay will be available online. We'll let everybody know about it. We'll ask you to share it with all of your colleagues on LinkedIn, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.